We know that when you're talking about such a sensitive topic, you are putting your livelihood at risk. If you take a shot at the powerful, you better hit. Yeah. Otherwise, it's going to be a problem for you.
Yeah. You know, the reason why you can't speak out is because you don't want to bite the hand that feeds you.
Hello.
And so to me, that was a better reason than any other reason that I could think of to pursue financial independence, because you want to be in a position where you can speak your truth without fear that somebody could take away your livelihood, or in this case, even your life. Ooh, that's beautiful.
So one of them's got to be an heirloom.
Which one do you think is the heirloom?
This one seems like it's the most likely to inherit something. So.
So last time you had some figs.
Figs. I love figs. My dad actually has a fig tree in the backyard.
All right, ready to make some mussels? Okay. What's the name of that character? It's like from the 1950s, the white woman.
Johnny Bravo?
No, it's like a white woman.
Oh.
Here it is. Do a little toss. Once they're open, they're cooked.
Ooh, that's good. Cheers.
Oh. Cheers.
Cheers.
So what do you want to talk about?
I want to talk about this moment that we're in.
What do we want? When do we want it?
The awakening, the reckoning, the revolution, if you're feeling generous, where racism is now like the national conversation. Yes, like white people are acknowledging racism.
Soup of the day.
Yeah, it's the soup of the day. Actually, it's the soup of like the month.
Yeah.
It's lasted way longer than I thought it would.
That's the biggest thing for me is and I hate to say it, but like people don't normally stay this upset for this long. The weekend comes, the issue's washed away, and something else pops up and becomes the new thing. And it's weird. It's like people are actually willing to talk about something that I think we've been mindful of, hyper aware of, trying to fight. And it's like, all of a sudden, now it matters, which I guess is a good thing.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of people say that they're willing to have the conversation. Like, I've been silent for far too long, and now I'm willing to talk about it. Yeah. I think people are now a little more hesitant to have like really public conversations because it's a hard topic. Like, even as a Black person, I'm scared I'm gonna say the wrong thing because the Black experience isn't universal. Like, my experience is not the same as, somebody from another part of the country or a different socioeconomic status. So it's hard to speak out, and it's like, I'm just talking about me. I'm not talking about like all Black people.
Yeah, it's so tough because like you're not like automatically equipped to talk about the Black experience just because you are Black, right? Like your Blackness, it certainly validates your experience, but it's tough because, you get pulled into all these conversations and, to your point, like being asked to sort of speak on behalf of all Black people as if we have a meeting in a newsletter that, other people are not, allowed into. And I'm actually more interested in the Black people who have recently been willing to acknowledge the challenges that they've had. You don't want to think that the reason why these things happen to me are because I'm Black, but And in some cases, you'll never know. It's not like you're gonna go find and track that person down and say, hey, did you do this thing?
Well, I mean, it's unconscious a lot of times. So even if you were to track down the person and ask them, they'd be like, no, of course not. It's because you didn't have 3 to 5 years experience or some other, surface level bias that doesn't speak to race.
First, you light it up. First, you just roll it and slice it like a sawing motion.
Look at that, perfect chiffonade.
Stop.
Smells so good.
You can always add more, but you can't take it away. You can just drink it. That's delicious. Needs a little bit of olive oil.
How do you know?
Because it's a little tart. I was trying not to joke. I remember years ago being in an office and having to really swallow the pain associated with some of the things that you saw on the news, knowing that people were getting killed by police.
Chilling moments that led to a police officer shooting and killing.
And still having to go to work and act like
everything's fine.
Everything is fine.
Yeah. How was your weekend? And it's like,
I spent
great, Susan.
Yeah, I spent my weekend trying to cope and heal from the trauma that I just saw, and I drank a little bit too much. So I apologize if I'm a little slow on Monday.
Yeah.
But that's real. Here we are, 5 years later. And I genuinely, I will say, I never thought that we would go through another wave like we did a couple of years ago. And literally we're going through another wave.
I think we're just able to pay more attention now because we're not distracted by work or the normal consumerism traps that make you forget how rough it is out there. Like when you can't use your normal coping mechanisms, you can't escape the way you normally would, you don't have the office and office politics to distract you, and you no longer have to pretend.
Yeah.
You see everything. You're hypersensitive to any piece of news. And so while it feels like this is a wave, there was no decline. It's always been this constant and consistent.
I think it's interesting that a lot of people don't necessarily see the role that money plays in a lot of this. And so there's all this talk about defunding the police or, the over-policing of certain neighborhoods. But oftentimes the larger issue is really framed up around social justice.
Yeah,
and they don't really
humanity.
Yeah, but people don't really see or acknowledge the role that money or finance plays or business, whatever.
It should be enough that humanity and justice are big enough reasons to move anybody to act. But when you think about racism and wealth inequality, they go hand in hand. That's what happens when you work for 400 years and don't get paid for it. That's America's original sin. And so to your point, a lot of the crime and statistics that you're seeing, the biases that you're seeing, the root of that is wealth inequality. The communities that are more likely to be over-policed are the ones that are lower funded. The areas that have harder times getting voter registrations and voting polls even. You saw that in Georgia a couple weeks ago. There are just certain counties where you can't even try to vote because the line is 8 hours long. That type of racism is rooted in wealth inequality. Yeah. I think that the type of racism that I've experienced the most is just in hiring. In looking at a company that's based in Atlanta, which is 40% Black, and looking at my executive team and my VP team and even my leadership team and not seeing anywhere near that ratio of Black talent. We went through several turnovers at the company, and each time they would just replace it with more white people. And it was not a pipeline problem. This is not a matter of not having talented Black marketing professionals in a city like Atlanta. this is the kind
of all places.
Right. Like this is the kind of bias that's based in you only hiring people or you preferring people that have the exact same background as you and look like you. Like that's what that is. There's no other reason for it. I was there for 11 years and there was never more than one or two executives.
We would literally have that conversation. Like we would just count them. It was like, all right, is this person? And before you know
I could count them on one hand. Yeah. And there was tons of us within the management ranks and the assistant management ranks, but like there was just no upward mobility, and there's nothing else to call that except racism. Like there's no other word for it, because when you look at the education levels, when you even look at the resume and the work that they did, like we were all working on the same thing.
And you got to call it what it is, because even those that were promoted were qualified for roles far beyond where they were, right? And so it's like it goes back to the old, saying of having to work twice as hard to get half as much, because, like to be a manager, you had to be like director level talent. And to be a VP.
And you had to do director level work for 2 years before you even got paid for it.
Yeah, you didn't have the luxury of working or learning as you go, right? Like that was not a privilege that was granted to you. You had to be overqualified. You had to be a shoo-in and have advocates to get those roles.
Committee of advocates.
Absolutely.
Not just your manager, like your manager's manager, their peer, their peer's boss. Like you had to have basically the entire organization aligned to your working style and talent. And that's impossible. That's an impossible standard to consider. I'm so happy that a lot of employees are now speaking out against stuff like that, because it's not, overt racism, but it is. Like when you go into that environment every day and you continue to look at marketing campaigns and vendors and even your colleagues, and there just is no representation, like that wears on you. And I'm happy that more people feel comfortable speaking about their experiences.
Yeah. I've experienced breakthroughs. I have. And I know what it looks like to see someone go from having deeply racist views to saying, oh my God, I never thought about that. And honestly, that's one of the reasons why I love food so much, is because it's an equalizer and it forces people to sort of feel good and be happy, and it encourages people to try things that they've never had before. The arts, if you will, is such a beautiful mechanism to helping people think about things a little differently, or to be open to things that they may not have been open to before. You gonna eat some mussels?
Mussels, right? The broth is really good.
It is. It's like mussel sweat and wine.
That doesn't sound appetizing.
You're eating it though.
I will say that a couple of companies have stepped up to the plate and acknowledged the role that money plays in writing the system. Yeah. And so like you've seen big companies like Google and YouTube and Netflix, where they're pledging like hundreds of millions of dollars specifically to Black entrepreneurship and grants for Black businesses, which I think is commendable, regardless of whether it's coming from a place of guilt or a place of like truly understanding the structural and systemic issues that we're trying to overcome. But what's been interesting is their employees' reactions to these like really big public service announcements, PR announcements around, we stand with you, we're listening and we're learning and we're committing the following things. And employees are like, how about you start inside, like in-house? Like, I want to talk about my particular experience with a manager who has made problematic comments, or let's look at our board, or let's look at how our Black Employee Resource Group is supported.
Microsoft has been posting powerful quotes on Twitter from Black employees describing how systemic racism takes a toll on their lives. But the company has come under fire for treating the BLM movement as a passing trend. A leaked email sent to mural artist Chantel Martin showed the company asked her to make a mural in honor of the BLM movement by June 7, while protests are still relevant.
We can't solve a problem that we don't acknowledge, and we all kind of play a role. And I know there's a lot of tension around, who should be leading these efforts, and racism isn't an issue that Black people need to be solving, but we do play a role, I think, in the solution, and we certainly can't ignore it, right? Or we can't continue to just be silent because we add to the pervasiveness of it. And so, yeah, I've been really, really happy to see that.
Like, there's a risk in speaking out. I mean, it's not easy. Like, that's been the most encouraging thing is like when we went into this pandemic, my wish for every employee was that they would have the courage to talk about how working from home is a much more modern and convenient way of thinking about work. The future of work should be flexible from a location perspective. Fast forward 3 months and now we're talking about, not only should it be flexible from a locations perspective, it should also be inclusive and welcoming and non-racist, anti-racist. And that's a totally different level of courage because we know that when you're talking about such a sensitive topic, you are putting your livelihood at risk. If you take a shot at the powerful, you better hit. Otherwise it's gonna be a problem for you.
That is if you remember, that's the reason why we took the picture with the golden handcuffs with our fists up, because honestly, we would have those conversations and it was like, the reason why you can't speak out is because you don't want to bite the hand that feeds you.
Hello.
And so to me, that was a better reason than any other reason that I could think of to pursue financial independence, because you want to be in a position where you can speak your truth without fear that somebody could take away your livelihood, or in this case, even your life. Crusty bread.
Meat.
Cheese. Mustard. I'll get the condiments. Perfection.
I just want the comments to say, sis made that toast.
People are more outspoken than they ever have been. It feels as if organizations and people are being held to a higher degree of accountability than they have been in the past. And so for Black professionals specifically, what we do with this moment is really, really critical. What we do with our income in this moment is really, really critical, because, from my standpoint, I mean, you can continue to believe that, like, you could assume that all of the things that we're seeing, people being called out or called to the carpet, that all of these things will end well, and next year the playing field will be level. Or you could be a student of history and say, it's quite unrealistic to assume that all of a sudden things will be fair, and that I will have just as much of a chance as my friends.
We'll gain some ground if we can strategize and be specific about what we want to see happen. But I will say that the progress we've made in the last 4 weeks has stretched my imagination
100%.
Way more than.
I'm optimistic. But I don't think Black America can afford to be so hopeful.
No.
The stakes are too high, right? Like, we are, especially for Black professionals, like, your income, your wealth is essentially accounting for 3 generations. You are paying for the underfunded boomer generations, or our parents' generation, many of who lost much of their wealth in the last recession.
It was the worst financial crisis in the U.S. since the Great Depression. Many people were no longer able to pay off their mortgages, and the banks foreclosed their homes.
And so for me, we actually cannot afford to assume that we will be always gainfully employed. The data suggests otherwise. We actually need to raise the stakes. We can't follow these general rules of thumb because the stakes are higher for us. We are, what did they say? The last in and the first ones to let go. And so in the workplace?
Last in, first out?
Last in, first out. LIFO. We really, really have to be smart about not just, who we vote for, but what we spend our money on, how we activate our capital in this moment.
And if we're keeping it 100, is how we support Black women. Like, we can't talk about Black wealth without including Black women, because when Black women are free, we all are free. And to talk about Black wealth without including Black women is ahistorical. Like, the first female millionaire in the United States was a Black woman. Like, it was Madam C.J. Walker. And so when you look at, if you are a student of history, and if you look at the numbers now and you see who is the largest growing cohort of entrepreneurs, who's graduating at the highest rates, it's Black women. And our lives are constantly threatened, and not just by police. It's by a jacked up healthcare system. It's by microaggressions at work. It's by, all of the things that we're facing. Like, it's all of the stuff that humanity brings plus some for Black women. And so when I think about the future of Black wealth and who takes advantage of this moment and who's supported in this moment, it's us, it's me, it's my people, it's my girl gang.
I support that.
Better. You better.
You just kind of fan it out.
What part of the pig is prosciutto?
The butt.
Is it really?
This big ass. This is whole grain mustard, so it's not like yellow prepared mustard. It looks like caviar.
It does, it looks grainy.
It does, it looks like an alien, doesn't it?
Ooh, that's good.
You know what I love about meat and cheese plates? Like, no matter how you do it, it looks fancy. Beautiful. I want to see more Black people have their fair share of the pie. And I'd love to see more conversations about entrepreneurship. I love that Black women are leading the charge there. I'd love to see more Black men pursuing entrepreneurship as well. And it doesn't have to be these extreme versions of it, like everyone wants to talk about the extreme, big idea version. Sometimes you just need to solve problems in your city. Like, if you know that there aren't that many moving companies or whatever it is, like, just solve those little problems, invest in solving those problems, and you can use that as a mechanism to drive change. But I think too many of us are holding on to the allure and this romantic idea of the six-figure job as the path to, wealth and safety and security. And I think corporate America has really proven that they're not really good at keeping their word. And so we need to be better students of history and look around, read the data, and build a foundation based off of facts.
Yes, facts. I love that. I've never needed anyone to remind me to shop Black. I've always supported Black businesses. I have Black art in my house. My son goes to a daycare that has, Black teachers. I grew up in a Black church. Like, I've just never needed that reminder.
And we bank Black.
And we bank Black, yeah, you're right. I've never needed that reminder, but now's a good time, better time than any in recent history, for everyone to audit their spending and make sure that their dollars are going towards causes and values that you want to see survive, that you want to support. As much as you can, make sure that you are being a conscious consumer and only buying, the things that you value and need. This is me trying something that I don't like. No, I want to try the green one. They both have seeds?
Yeah, pit.
A pit. It is aggressive.
Well, just chase it with this anchovy. Yeah.
Were there any things that you just knew you were gonna do when you got money because of shows you watched or people you saw in your life when you were growing up?
No.
No.
No, I didn't have, those were not the characters in my neighborhood. I watched The Cosby Show, but I wasn't that big of a fan of it. The only episodes I really loved were the musical episodes where they would sing. Oh, no, the one where they would do it man.
Oh, when they were on the stairs.
They would come down the stairs.
Yeah, Rudy.
Yeah. Yes. Ray Charles. Yeah. I didn't identify, because I didn't, it just didn't seem real.
The whole thing was foreign.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it didn't, because that just did not exist in 1980s, early 90s Brooklyn.
Niggas wanna stick me for my cream, and it ain't a dream. Things ain't always what it seems.
Were you ever motivated by like what you could buy with money, or was it more what you could do with money?
I was motivated by where I could go with money, but not like what I could buy.
You didn't want like a Atari or, I don't even know what to say.
I think I was trained to not want things because the answer was always no. Like there was no, and if I did get a thing, it was the thing from last year. It was not the thing, it was not the thing in the moment. It was like, whatever was popping last year, you would get this year. I've never had or worn a pair of Jordans, ever.
Really?
Never.
Have you ever wanted to?
No.
Because you were trained not to want.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're not that comfortable.
I wouldn't know. And it's also scary to want to build wealth, I think, as a Black person. Like I've said it. I think building wealth as a Black person is one of the loneliest experiences you could ever have. The wealthier you become, the wider your world becomes. And so to build wealth actively, in a lot of cases, is to openly leave people behind and to separate yourself from your community and your family even. Like it's really, really difficult to do that. And it's because it's really hard to balance the two. And that's part of the reason why we started our blog, is to sort of encourage other people to not let that be a barrier to them wanting to achieve more.
That feeling is as old as time. Like I think Madam C.J. Walker left her third husband because...
Couldn't handle it.
Well, no, she said it was because of the limits of his imagination. Like when she started making $10 a week, he thought that was enough. And she was like, 10 is just like a portion of what I can get. Like, and that was $10 a week. And Harriet Tubman, I don't know what's myth or what's fact, but like there are clear stories of Harriet like leaving people behind. Yeah. Why am I on a first name basis with Harriet Tubman first? My girl Harriet leaving people behind and just having to like go back for her family and like just dealing with this idea that like in order to move forward, like everybody can't make the journey. That's really difficult to grapple with. And I think that is unique to people of color and marginalized people.
So the big question is, why does Black wealth matter?
It's such a big question, but it shouldn't be. Because like Michael Che says, matter is the freaking bare minimum. Yeah.
That's a controversial statement. Black lives matter. Not matters more than you, just matters. Matters. That's where we're starting the negotiations.
If you want to participate economically in ways that our ancestors could have never imagined, you got to step up and take the steps now. Yeah. Otherwise, wealth will be even more concentrated than it is now, which is really hard to believe.
We actually have to be way more self-sufficient than other communities are, because we can't rely on the systems to help us. Sure. And so it's up to us, those who have the means, those who have the interests and the ability to channel that towards creating the thing that we know it can be a huge force for change, and that is money.
Preach, preacher.
So here's what I'm gonna do. It's time for my favorite part, rolling the dice to see who does the dishes. But I'm gonna do the dishes this time. And then you can get busy changing the world.
It really is the least you can do. You know, supporting Black women starts with clearing the table and doing these dishes after a meal.
I would appreciate your partnership in that effort. But cheers to you.
Cheers.